What's up, gamers? Welcome to the video. My name is Koobs, and today what I've got for you is a Super Break Sushang Showcase. This is actually kind of like Super Break Sushang Part 2 Electric Boogaloo, because we did this same showcase about 3 months ago, in which we took on MoC Stage 11, where Kafka is the main boss. This is a perfect environment for Sushang because all of the enemies have physical weakness. Beyond that, we have some changes to our team this time around. Of course, 3 months ago we didn't have Fugue, so at the time we were using Harmony Trailblazer to provide our Super Break boon to the team. This time around we have Fugue providing that, and some other things. Pretty awesome character, been very impressed with her so far. I do want to preface that I have some vertical investment in my characters, so my limited 5-star units here. Ranmei is E2 with her signature light cone, and my Fugue is E1. I tried to go for her light cone and we lost. It's a bummer, man. We'll try to get that in the future, but I did want to throw that out there because as much as this is a Sushang showcase, it's also very much going to be highlighting the benefits of vertical investment with characters like Ranmei, with Fugue. Basically our limited support units. In my opinion, they're worth going for Eidolons for, given the amount of value that they can give to your account as a whole, right? Characters like Ranmei, Robin's a really good alternative. If you invest vertically into these characters, you're going to have just way more value and longevity out of them. They fill so many roles for you, they can fit into so many different team compositions that for me it's just a no-brainer, smart investment to invest vertically. However, with that said, that does kind of bring, us to the conversation of power creep. Because why do I need to invest vertically into my supportive units for them to have a longer lifespan? Shouldn't they just have a long lifespan to begin with, Koobs? And yeah, man, I would agree with you there. So there's a lot of nuance to this topic of power creep. I think that it's a really interesting kind of a topic because it doesn't necessarily apply broadly to all players in the same ways. And I'll kind of try to explain why. So the first time around, Super Break Sushang, she clears MoC Stage 11 in 1 cycle. And I'm pretty impressed by that. She was able to clear MoC 12 at the time in 4 cycles. And I think it's probably pretty similar. I didn't really mess around with MoC 12 with this Super Break Sushang team too much to say for sure. But regardless, the main thing that I wanted to compare was the run in MoC 11 against Kafka and how similar these two runs are. The main thing that I have to think about when I'm doing this comparison is obviously that my account has progressed in those 3 months since the last time that we took on this stage, right? I have a new character, and I also have a new Eidolon for that character. So the power level of my overall account has risen, right? My ceiling has gone up. I can now do more damage as a unit than I was able to before because of the investment into my account. So in some ways, it is appropriate for there to be a little bit of an HP inflation towards the enemies. But to what extent is where I think the problems are coming in. And so while maybe I'm not necessarily experiencing power creep with this team, I might very well be experiencing it with some of my other teams, if that makes sense. So I do think that it's kind of this nuanced discussion that sometimes we aren't really seeing the whole picture of, because we can say, well, I'm not feeling power creep, but I'm keeping up to date with all of the new limited units and things like that. Alright, maybe we'll come back to the ramblings of a madman about power creep in a bit, but one of the things I did last time around was I did this damage breakdown at the end of the run. So we finished our run, we managed to clear in 1 cycle, which is the same as we were able to clear previously, and when we take a look at our damage output, we can see Sushang is the main contributor here. But what I like to do is I like to go back and I like to take a look at each of the individual breaks that happen, and I contribute that damage that is coming from Ranmei to her in our damage breakdown, just so we can kind of get more of an accurate representation of where that damage is truly coming from. Every time a break happens, Ranmei is contributing damage to that break, and so I think that it's only fair to kind of give her, you know, that piece of the pie, if you will. And so when we look back at last time's results, you can see we're doing about 400,000 less damage as a team. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is this damage from Ranmei has pretty much doubled. And that's specifically because of the Exo toughness break that we're getting from Fugue being on the team. So her presence is not only giving us, you know, added benefits to, like, we get super break by default, we get an ultimate that does toughness damage to everybody, we get the Foxian prayer ability, but we're also now giving Ranmei more damage output, which is really kind of cool and interesting. But you can see it's pretty much 50-50. Sushang's doing about 50% damage, the rest of the team is contributing, and I really like that for this sort of a play style, for this sort of a team composition. Everybody's chipping in a little bit to that overall damage output. It doesn't feel like anybody is just there to do one specific thing. Everybody's kind of filling multiple roles on the team, which I think is really great. And I like the synergy of this team, and that's one of the things that really draws me to this sort of gameplay, personally. In the background here, you can see the builds that I'm using for the different characters. One of the changes that I made to this run was that my Sushang was more focused on specifically break effect this time around. In the previous showcase that I did, when we had Harmony Trailblazer on the team, I used a kind of like a crit break hybrid build. I had some pieces from my Zhueyi, so I had about like 75% crit rate and 100% crit damage with like 180% break effect. And what I found was that when the enemy wasn't broken, that it was actually useful to have those crit stats, because it would raise your damage output when the enemy is not weakness broken, and you could contribute like 100,000 maybe to 200,000 damage throughout the course of a run with that added critical damage investment. What I'm finding this time around, now that we have Fugue on the team, now that we're getting a second break with her Exo toughness, now that the enemies are broken for a little bit longer, and also because of her Eidolon 1, which is giving added weakness break efficiency to the character that has the Foxian prayer, it means that our team is also breaking the enemies faster. So not only are the enemies being broken faster, they're being broken a second time, and they're staying in the weakness broken state for longer, which means that we're really kind of maximizing our break damage and super break damage in those runs, where the damage that's coming when the enemy is not weakness broken there's like less of it, if that makes sense. So having those crit stats invested in didn't make as much sense this time around. So just something to keep in mind. Well, that's pretty much the extent of what I've got for us today. I did a run that I'm going to include at the end here, in which I put the Foxian prayer onto Gallagher instead of onto Sushang. I think that this run's going to be a little bit more indicative of what a player would experience if they didn't have Fugue at E1. You would more than likely put the Foxian prayer onto a character like Gallagher, who doesn't already have like the weakness type that you're going against. So because all these enemies have physical weakness, I don't necessarily need to give the prayer to Sushang, because she can still do her job as a breaker. So if I put the prayer on Gallagher, then it actually allows him to break the enemy's toughness when he otherwise wouldn't be able to. And because he has an AoE ultimate, he can actually break, you know, the enemies that we aren't focusing on as Sushang. So I did want to kind of include this at the end here, but obviously, like, if you're not interested, go ahead. We'll see you next time. I really appreciate you for being here. But I did want to include this because I do think that this is going to be a little bit, like I said, a little bit more akin to what somebody who has E0 Fugue would be like. You're probably going to put that Foxian prayer onto a character like Gallagher. Maybe you have somebody like Lingsha. You can put the buff on them, and then they're contributing to, you know, lowering the enemy's toughness, as well as Sushang, because she didn't need the prayer to begin with, if that makes sense. However, when I have the Eidolon 1, I want to give that prayer to my damage dealer, because it's going to give them that added weakness break efficiency. And when we calculate our super break damage, we take weakness break efficiency, the total weakness break efficiency that a character has, or the toughness damage that they're dealing, into consideration when it comes to our damage output. So more weakness break efficiency equals more toughness reduction equals more super break damage. So I also have I have Rappa, probably one of the few people who has Rappa, but I've got her. Huge fan. I think she's dope. And so if I was running a team with Rappa and Fugue, if I had Fugue at E0, then I would always be putting the buff onto Gallagher. But since I have Fugue at E1, it changes that a little bit, and I actually kind of want to put the buff onto Rappa in some situations, because it will elevate her damage output that much further. So just things to think about. I do think that Eidolons are cool and fun, and part of me, yes, I do agree that it would be better if the characters were just more complete, and if the Eidolons didn't complete them. Like if Fugue, just by default, when she gave somebody a Phoxian Prayer, if it also increased their weakness break efficiency by 50%, would that be so game breaking, right? Or does that have to be locked behind getting a full second copy of the character in order to have that increase in power, if that makes sense? So just my thoughts, just some ramblings here towards the end. I get it. I feel you. I know where you're coming from when you say that things don't necessarily feel great in Honkai Star Rail right now. I'm really, personally, I'm hoping that we experience some changes in the way that the endgame content is delivered to us, so that it doesn't constantly feel like we have to be pulling for newer units in order to clear the endgame content. Because I don't think that necessarily feels good. I think that for me, I like pulling for the characters that I like, characters that I find fun. And right now, I'm not pulling for the Herda, I'm not pulling for Aglaya, I'm not pulling for Mighty, I'm not pulling for Tribi. So it's like I've got, months that I'm going to go without getting a new character because these characters don't really interest me, and the story's kind of lackluster. So I don't know. We'll see how it goes with Honkai Star Rail. I love the game, but I'm really hoping that they can kind of turn some things around. Anyways, I have been, always will be, Koobs. Thank you so much for being here. Remember to love yourself. Peace and love, gamers.